There's a war going on for attention because we're all bombarded with content and messages, but therefore we can be a lot more creative and actually then coming to the right decision on what we do and how we invest our money.
Strategy more important than ever because they're the people who scalpel through everything and go, no, it's this way. You're throwing the kitchen sink at it, streamline. This is your compass. And I guess, strong marketeers who can balance gut and instinct, which is important because we're solving human problems.
Hello, welcome to the Media Leader podcast. I'm Omar Oakes and welcome to this special series with our friends at Bloomberg Media about the future of marketing. Welcome to episode 3, where we're here today to talk about how to really move the needle with storytelling and engaging audiences. Now, I'm particularly excited about this episode. It's a particularly fraught question in conversations in the industry, in advertising and media, because the landscape has changed so much when it comes to the big idea and how we tell that to audiences. Linear audiences for TV and radio don't hear around big primetime shows as much as they used to. The big idea used to be something you launch in quite reliable and predictable ways. But now how do you do that when increasingly people watch content at different times and in different ways on different platforms? And how do you test and learn when there are so many sources of data all telling you things in different ways and forms? Here to unpack all of that in the very limited time we have today is Duncan Chater, who is European Managing Director at Bloomberg Media. Hello to you again, Duncan. Thanks for joining us. And let me put you on the spot with a completely unprepared question. I promise we did not prepare this in advance. What was the last bit of media content you consumed?
I actually listened to the Rebooting Show by Brian Morrissey this morning.
What's that? Is that audio,
it's
TV?
Audio.
Yeah.
So he does a podcast on media. And I tap into that. And so it's quite nice. I have quite a long commute in the morning, which tends to consist of me getting myself a little bit prepared for the day, doing a few personal duties, making sure I'm organised with everything that my wife and kids need, and then normally into emails and into a bit of media industry kind of insight. So that was my tipple this morning.
Well, I love that. For someone who hosts a podcast about the business of media, it's very encouraging to know that there are people who listen to such things. So that's brilliant. You should do the same. And also joining us as our special guest today is Ann Wixley, who is Executive Creative Director at WPP media agency Wavemaker. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ann. Firstly, help me out. I'm a bit confused. So you're at a media agency, but you're an Executive Creative Director. I thought only ad agencies, creative agencies that did the ads had such a thing. Why are you there? What do you do? How rare are you?
I guess show that media agencies are as creative in the broader sense of creativity as the rest of the agencies. So I guess this role represents that. And obviously we also create with media. So it started 15 years ago. Since then, I'm kind of proud to say that there are quite a few of us knocking about. We work quite collaboratively and within the agency. So we probably less in the front and more behind the scenes, I would say. Hence, you maybe don't know about us that much. But certainly every Wavemaker across the world has an ECD or a creative or certainly a head of innovation. And the Group M agencies too, my colleagues, Becky and Tom. So we're about.
Very interesting and fits into the wider narrative, which we might get into today about how media agencies very much changing and traditional models breaking down, which is obviously relevant to the advertiser conversation as well. But for today, so we're going to talk about the big idea, as I already mentioned. How has it changed in 2024 and beyond? Reaching people with a singular campaign message as audiences become more fragmented. How do we do that? We're going to talk about what in-house expertise is available when you're working with media owners and what are the optimal ways to work with studios and content creators. So first, let's talk about the big idea, Duncan. I mean, how do you see the big idea nowadays? We talked a lot in previous episodes about working with selected audience. Is that even something, for example, for those sorts of clients and the audiences they're trying to reach, they even think about a big idea? I'm really concerned about the ideas that we communicate in advertising and how rooted in the culture they are.
And we talked about some of this stuff on the first podcast, actually. But I think it all really comes down to the ask. In fact, not just media owners, I'm sure as agencies, actually, we all love a big idea moment or a big idea challenge, let's say, with that client that needs to change perceptions around their brand or that has a big message to kind of communicate, and they want to do it in an impactful way and at scale. So I think that's for kind of creative minded people. I think that's always a joy to receive one of those challenges. I think what is becoming perhaps, I say what is, it's been this way for a long time. What's very different now is we've gone from years back of really planning and thinking about media by platform, and the benefit that we had back then was actually having a real depth of understanding about that specific platform or a specific brand, people that really knew and understood exactly how to convey messaging and deliver messaging in the right way. And now we're in a much more expanded landscape. You know, we've talked before, Bloomberg publishes content across 9 platforms. So, you know, we've got a lot of choice at our disposal, but we have to be mindful of, we have to make those choices with cost implications and effectiveness very much in mind. So for me, the big idea really is understanding first what the message and the business challenge or marketing challenge is for the customer. And then therefore, should we start with creativity and the message, or are we starting actually with what do we need to deliver and which one is most important? I think actually starting in the right place helps us actually deliver the right result. So I think for me, that's the big idea, really starts initially with understanding the client objective, really kind of drilling in, getting into asking the right questions to understand for them what's going to be the most important thing. Is it at the end of the campaign? And obviously both are really important. We need to deliver a really good job, move the needle and deliver the results. But also we need to deliver a really compelling message and creativity, and which one is the priority across the marketeer and the board. And I think understanding that puts us in a strong starting position to build the right foundations.
Yeah. And Ann Wixley, I mean, it's very different for you on the agency side because you work across multiple client accounts where, you know, Duncan talks about the ask. Lots of clients will have very different asks. So how relevant is even the big idea if you can generalize the work that you're doing now and anticipate work doing in future?
I'd say the big idea has never been more important, because in order for people to build a perception of a brand and a love for it and an engagement for it and an understanding of the role it plays in their lives beyond function, you know, that needs to shoot through every encounter they have. So you need a big, genuinely big, actually big ideas. The best big ideas are tiny ideas. I always think very specific anyway, but you do need it's really a brand idea. And then you need to be able to express that in your body language, which I think is media. So it depends on, I guess, if you think about brand ideas and brand platforms versus campaigns. But if you think about Real Beauty, or if you think about Nationwide's new proposition, and if you think about Cadbury's a glass and a half, there's a glass and a half in everyone, is still, those are all big brand ideas that have lasted for decades and are expressed in different ways every year, depending on what they're needing to do. And the choice of media, of how you express that, and also how you then deliver on the marketing objectives. You know, there's a problem here or there's an opportunity there, you know, shifts but that big idea stays true. And it's the business that product is in with an idea behind it, which elevates it beyond just, oh, there's a, it's a thing that does that and I can choose any of these 10.
And is that still how commonly understood is that? I can imagine a lot of conversations with marketers where they think about being channel first and they think about, well, we've got to be this sort of brand to this audience, but actually it would be more effective if we presented ourselves in this way to that audience. Does that compromise the big idea, or is it just means you need to work harder to express one idea differently to different audiences?
I think you need to work harder. I think all the great marketeers understand that you need something else other than just to say what something is on the tin. That's an idea, really, that, puts this product or this brand in your head, in people's heads, and it has, it sits on a certain shelf. So they understand that. It means we have to work harder. And I think it's so much fun. I mean, we've never been in a more exciting time, where brand idea meets body language and an understanding of the need to get round a table and argue it out. In a way, Duncan, you were talking about kind of the chicken and egg. Is it media first or then creative or other? I would argue it is what is the marketing brief? What is the business problem? Holistic view. I do think it works to have media set, what budgets do we have, define the audience, the growth audience, set out the kind of bones of it. But then there should be space for that big brand idea to come in to actually perhaps flip the whole plan, because perhaps it's a perception job that you then need to get media behind. And that changes the business trajectory versus throwing money at it. I think it's the marketing plan. Media kind of sets the bones, and then there might be an argument and a tussle between the big idea and how we go about it. That gets resolved, and everyone, delivers. But there should be space in the middle there for an opportunity to pivot. Because I guess I'll use a really super old example. But if you Levi's was a client of mine ages ago back in South Africa. So I've always watched them and I'm a big fan. And you think of Hegarty's work with, I heard it through the grapevine and the laundromat. Boxers shorts suddenly were back in. But, they had a business problem. He turned that around with a big, fat, juicy, gorgeous idea. So that's an example of answering a business problem with a big idea. But at the same time, you need the media to be able to deliver it. But that idea could have also been solved with perhaps a more kind of creative business solution. And then the brand, work came in. So you should always consider that you might, the opposite of a good idea is another good idea, which is really awkward. But, and obviously I'd say that because I'm kind of divergent versus, convergent. But that is true. So it's about giving them equal weighting and weighing that up. Yeah. And then coming together.
Yep. Is that part of the challenge, though? Because now there's so many options for us in media to do, and so many platforms and so many different treatments. And we've got, and obviously there's a war going on for attention because we're all bombarded with content and messages. But therefore, we can be a lot more creative and actually then coming to the right decision on what we do and how we invest our money versus obviously the Levi's ad. At that moment, TV was the platform to drive a big idea. So you were kind of really, that was the funnel. And now there's multiple ways. And that's really exciting. I think it's exciting for the whole industry. But I think also it does pose a challenge because there's just a lot of complexity, and where do you go? How do you navigate this huge ecosystem to get what you want? And I think, for me, it then does often, And I think you mentioned it a little bit. It does lead you back to audience. And I know we talked about this. Really, everything starts with audience. And if you can understand audience, it allows you to actually focus in a little bit more on what that big idea should be and how you stand out and how you highlight the uniqueness that a company is trying to communicate.
Yeah, I think in principle, any marketer anyway listening to this would agree. I think the challenge would be, well, we're very mindful. I'm very mindful that as a media owner agency, you're chasing quite sizable budgets. But frankly, to a big brand advertiser, advertising is frankly a small piece of the whole puzzle that they're facing. I mean, what would you say as people are trying to build better teams, more effective teams in-house? What expertise is available? Well, for instance, when working with a media owner such as yourselves, how can I, if I'm leading a marketing team, upskill or recruit people or use tools to better work with you?
Ultimately, both sides need to have a good knowledge of each other's business, because I think that's the kind of foundations that if you both understand each other's business to a level, that allows us to ask better questions and to then bring in the right experts. I mean, I think where you're getting to in terms of knowledge, I think everyone needs to be curious and needs to develop and learn and play around with tools, whether that's any generative AI product at the moment. And we talk about that. I talk about it with my kids of actually just playing around, understanding what it does. Because if you can understand what it does, then you can utilize technology in the best way to answer challenges. So I think some of it's curiosity, and then some of it's actually, there is a real skill in bringing the right talent into the conversation and not the wrong talent. If you get that wrong, that can lead a whole project down a wrong pathway. If you get it right, then that's really interesting. One campaign that we did that was a big challenge, actually, we worked with a Swiss company called Wholesome, who are big in the kind of building industry and cement. And they were doing some really, really great work around in the sustainability space. And they wanted to kind of create a platform to really be able to tell their story. So we did a lot of work at looking at both the industry, their business, and how we could best tell that story. And actually where we landed was creating a data tool, a barometer. And, this is something I think I mentioned in the first podcast as well. It's something that we're seeing is really working. It's really compelling, certainly with our audiences of, business leaders and investors, government officials and so on. I think actually bringing information through data is a really cool way to do that. But we actually built a tool, a utility for audiences. So it was useful. And we built a dashboard that basically evaluated 16 different cities and how they were performing from a circular economy point of view. So lots of data metrics and then case studies. So it became a destination, a platform that people could come to, they could learn and understand. But also for Wholesome, it gave them something that they could build their communications around. It became really useful for their CEO when he was going out and talking about delivering thought leadership. He could actually use that to drive new messaging and actually use that as a kickoff point for their marketing team. They could use that to deliver some of their specific case studies and some of the qualities that they wanted to promote. It was delivering content for their website. So it had lots of different uses. But that was a big idea for us, very creative, but really kind of started in understanding their business, but also understanding the audiences that they were trying to reach and what they wanted, what was going to engage them. So I think those things can be really, really impactful.
A rock solid plan for providers, so I can help it.
Terrible, Omar. Can I answer that question as well?
Yes,
a little bit.
Yeah. So, what in-house expertise is available when you're working with media owners, for example?
Well, in terms of media owners, I think the most useful tools and things that they have I think, is knowledge of audience and how they respond, and quite granularly to what they put out there. Talking about media owners, they know exactly how people respond to certain kinds of articles, and that's what engages them, how they like to be able to have fun in the comments. There's some, let alone the bigger topic. So their insight into individual people and then the big seismic moves is fabulous and amazing to work with. And again, they've got an ecosystem that they know which levers to pull. So in a way, they're like a mini microcosm of a bigger, fatter media plan. So I think knowledge of platform and how you can go with what they always do or break it and innovate it to stand out is also really powerful. So both those levers are key. But in terms of, I wanted to answer the thing about kind of people and kinds of people. So I think diversity of creative thinkers is super important. And just in Cannes last year, I noticed that the difference. I judged about 6 years ago and then again last year. And there was a very different feeling in terms of hierarchy of creatives. It used to be back in the day that the ad agency creative was, important. And if you were not that kind of creative, who the hell were you? But now there's a real opening up and of the hierarchy and understanding that you need all kinds of creative thinkers, whether they strategic design, whether they play with tech innovation, whether they big brand creatives, whether they media creatives who understand body language, and that together really helps. So that's one thing I would say. Second thing I would say, strategy more important than ever, because they're the people who scalpel through everything and go, no, it's this way. You're throwing the kitchen sink at it. Streamline. This is your compass. And I guess strong marketeers who can balance gut and instinct, which is important because we're solving human problems. Therefore, you need a human answer, like a gut, with data and their business needs. I mean, balancing that together to kind of steer the ship.
Yeah.
And that's
something we got into a lot on episode 1, wasn't it? The angst, if I can put it that way, among marketers, that they need to be more involved in strategic decisions of the business, not just the person that buys the ads, etc.
Can I ask a question? Because it kind of and we see this actually within our business. We're a global business, so offices everywhere, and we work really, really closely together across all regions. But actually, what's dawning on me actually a little bit, it's something that we experience, which is just that the collaboration word within all of this, which is massive, because we've talked already about the complexity of the industry and the opportunity that the industry has and the talent, and there's so many different types of creative thinkers. How do we get everyone together? And when does it work well? Because, I don't, even within our own organizations, it can be a challenge of getting the right people in the room and steering them, or having the right meetings. And then when you amplify that of partnerships, of working with an agency or a consultancy and marketeers, and then the different marketing teams within a brand, particularly when it's multi-region, it does, it's really... What are your examples of that? I've turned into a question now, but I think interesting of when are the examples when it works really well?
I would say this, but I think that's it, where it does help to have some outsiders together with the business. And that's what, the power of agencies, because sometimes people talk about the value of a consultant or agency, and that's quite helpful, I think, for marketeers, whether they have an in-house team or not, just to have an outsider coming in with fresh eyes, number one. Secondly, a bit of a bad cop, good cop. So you can also kind of put the problem on the table and have people walk around it versus owning the problem and then you defending it. And, I think that's quite hard. So that was a bit of an abstract answer. But I think Pixar got it right. People will have talked about that before. Ed Catmull, his book, oh gosh, and I'm going to forget the title. Google it.
I've also forgotten it's a big red book.
Creativity
Inc. Yeah.
Yes,
Creativity
that's the one.
Inc. Yeah.
They deal with that, with the brain trust. So they believe in the specialists coming in to a room with their, what they're working on, and then a brain trust of experienced, multi-skilled people who look at the work, input into it, and that expert who's leading it gets to then take the feedback or not, depending. But it's very much, the brain trust is people who know what they're doing. There's a diversity there. There is a mutual trust and respect. So you kind of open out the process, then you close it down, and then you open out and close it down. So that's quite an effective process. I think IDEA also, it's kind of universal. It's difficult to put into action, but it's about defining roles, I think. You know how the world is in cycles of it's the time of the specialists, then it's the time of the generalists, or the bundling, unbundling, and I feel like we're in a time when we need to have specialists and generalists in the room together. And that's interesting. I mean, it's slightly chaotic, so you've got to be comfortable with it and just kind of.
Well, it definitely feels like we're in that time where the pendulum's swinging back to the generalist, doesn't it? Where the last 10 years, it's been so platform centric, and you've needed to have specialists who know how to optimize for TikTok and all kind of like the emerging channels, and marketers not wanting to be behind the curve. But it feels, I don't know, I mean, feel free to disagree.
I think it's both.
I agree.
I think you can't be a generalist and you can't be a specialist. So, everyone
T-shape.
has to be, exactly. Everyone has to be a generalist to a degree, but then you've got to have a specialist area as well. So even when I think about how we structure our team's structured and focused by industry, by vertical. So that's their specialism, is that they understand that industry really well, but then their generalism is they've got to understand every single media platform and all of our brands and all of our audiences. So it's too complex now, the media system. So you can't afford to just be in one area. I know we would argue some of the platforms have done that, but I think even within the platform world, that's expanding now. And, everything's more challenging in terms of knowledge.
Yeah, which I suppose makes your point, Anne, about, both your points you've made in different ways about collaboration really important. I mean, if you're a marketer listening to this, what's the best way would you advise in order to encourage collaboration? And do you find, is there a general rule of thumb for what works better, to have, different, team of rivals, different people from different companies coming together to work on a marketer's brief? Or, it's just as simple, just let me put everything with one company?
I think first about the skills you get into the room and the mix of generalists, specialists, creatives, strategic people, kind of doers, executional people. And I guess they're different models where you can get it all at one shop, but there's specialisms within it. If you zoom out to WPP, that's what we've got.
Yeah, WPP loves doing this, don't they? Team red, team blue for Ford, and team green for Walgreens, running out of colours.
Yes, but we don't always just make an integrated team. I mean, I might be talking slightly out of turn, but we can also come together and move apart again, and be able to consult with the brand agency guys or the creative people, and then go back into your own specialism without being in team fusion. Marketeers can also put that together with their roster of agencies. If you've got a clear brief and you know where you're gunning for, and everyone delivers on their specialism, but also is allowed to bring some stuff that's outside of their box to the table. And as a brain trust, you choose what's the best answer, and no hierarchy, just the best answer. And then you go back into your specialisms to deliver that. So marketeer kind of as conductor with trusted partners, and everyone kind of getting that they're going to do their bit. I mean, most clients that I come across are I've jumped across quite a lot. I mean, Danone work, bringing everyone together, and then everyone goes back off into their specialisms. Perfetti Van Melle, very good at bringing all their people together behind a single idea. PepsiCo, who I used to work with,
very briefly, what makes them good at doing that, whereas maybe others aren't so much? What's the magic ingredient?
Gosh, I mean, they
is it more of an attitudinal thing as opposed to having direct incentives for?
Yeah, it's probably an attitudinal thing,
Yeah.
and I guess there's a sense of trust in the room, and also where everyone feels valued, and some of that for some agencies, because they're in a business and they need to pay their people, that is to know that you are going to be paid, whether or not you're going to execute. That does matter because, otherwise it changes the agenda if you're in the room thinking freely, but that the only way you're going to get paid is if you end up executing. That doesn't, I don't mean being profligate, but just those brains are worth every penny. So,
yeah,
I think that goes to is the value created in shaping the message, right? And we were talking about this earlier of, if it's audience, really understanding what that audience is doing, what their consumption habit is, what their patterns are, so that then you can actually execute the idea effectively. Now, you might not be the company that's executing, but if you're helping to really shape the clarity around what that message needs to be and how it should be delivered, then you're adding value. And I think, we've got a nice process at Bloomberg where we're able to go into financial data, industry data, and really understand what's happening within a sector to help companies identify and give them real clarity of actually there's some white space right here and you're really good at it, but you're not getting the value. That's an opportunity for you to own. So in the case like with Wholesome that I mentioned earlier, that no one in their sector was owning circularity. And they own that now. So how, they're the things I think in being able to do that. But then you've got to also go back and cross-check and say, does the audience that you're reaching, is that also important to them? It's the through line between what's important in an industry, what the company can do effectively and well, that's going to add value and is unique. And then, is that going to be meaningful for the audience that you're trying to relate to? And if you can connect all of those things, then you've got a shot at delivering a winning idea. Then you've got to actually put the content together in a way that's compelling and distribute it in the best way to grab attention and stand out. But it's a long process, isn't it? Even when we just took and there's lots of people that can be involved and add value in that. So collaboration is super critical throughout the journey.
Yeah, and Duncan, we spent a fair bit of time talking about the idea, but you mentioned execution as well. I mean, what would you say are the optimal ways to work specifically with studios and content creators? In episode 1, you talked about a very interesting example of the chap from Game of Thrones, who I'll never remember because I didn't watch
Nikolai Coster-Waldau.
Okay. Who was, I suppose, an influencer, if you want to use that word, that was behind a campaign that you did. Now, a lot of brand marketers are nervous, I think it's fair to say, when working with influencers and actually handing over creative control to, Anne talked about how that's become democratized and she's seeing it in the work even at Cannes Lions, that high level. What would you do, I guess, to reassure a marketer in terms of, ceding that creative control to work with content creators, to work with different studios?
Well, I think it comes down to what the ambition is, and then can that individual or brand, can they help to elevate that message and make it stand out? I think, where talent like Nikolai, who's done this show for us and then campaigns, or any of the talent that we work with, we've got some in-house, they have a really strong emotional connection with their audiences, but also they have loyalty. There's audience that have a regular pattern of tuning into whether it's a show or this podcast or, whatever it is, if you've got that kind of regular pattern, then you've got an emotional connection, and that gives you then a platform to be able to articulate a message. And so what I would say, we do have this conversation a lot, is you can go out, any brand can go out and create their own content and distribute it. And you can then shape that content and the message in the exact way that you want to. But is that going to deliver and engage with every person as deeply as using someone who has a stronger emotional connection? Possibly, possibly not, probably not. But then what's the payoff? Because you can't then distribute the messages deeply, but you can hit more scale. Yeah. And I think that's then the clarity of what you're trying to do. What's more important? Are you trying to reach lots of people, or are you trying to reach a smaller group of the right people and tell a deep story? And I think, that helps shape different executions. I mean, for us, we're seeing now live experiences are really coming back, and live experiences are a fantastic way of really telling kind of deep, complex messaging, because the attention moment is broader. And actually that's enabled us to even create content and physical content and experiences within the platform to go even deeper. So I think there's lots of ways, but often then the payoff is you don't get the same scale. So you're telling a really, really deep story with the right audience. And we would also then always say, well, how do we amplify some of that messaging so that, to give you like broader exposure, but it's not going to be as deep. Yeah. So it's like buying a house, isn't it? You never get everything you want, but like you've got to make the decisions of what's the most important and make sure you get those bits right.
Just getting any house nowadays would be good for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And do you have any build on that, optimal ways to work with studios and content creators?
Yes. I mean, I think the art and craft of media planning and comms planning helps you work on what is the role of, say, creators and influencers versus pure brand controlled messaging, and what's the mix and what are you trying to achieve. I think there's a power again in using specialists in that space. So we work a lot with GOAT, who are very good at identifying the right creators and influencers from the beginning strategically, and they've got all the rigor and data behind it that reassures our clients that we've got the right mix of people. Working with creators, it's about respect. They know their audience more than anything, more than anybody else. They're super creative beings. So they understand how to work within the confines and constraints, yet be really creative with it. So it's about giving them kind of, intelligent briefing,
Why is that better than, for example, GOAT? I mean, they work with loads and loads of influencers all over the world nowadays, don't they? Why is that better than, you mentioned one of your clients, Danone. If Danone were to, why isn't it better to have an influencer or content creator who's actually doing stuff on an owned Danone social media account or something, as opposed to, because these influencers have built up very good audiences by themselves, but they're the brand, and the brand doesn't own that content. So why is it better to do what GOAT's doing as opposed to the brand doing it themselves?
I think you need both. I mean, I'll use a strange analogy, but I think you don't give yourself a nickname. Somebody else has to give it to you, and that's the power, is a third party translating that brand in their way, and complimenting, compliment from somebody else is much better than you can't give it to yourself, and like you can't give yourself a nickname. That's just kind of verboten,
dare I
right?
ask, have you been given a nickname?
I've had several.
Can you reveal any?
From anarchy to say, like silly things. I don't know, red. Strange things. Betty Ballerina was my first.
Because of course in a previous life you were a ballet dancer.
Yes, and I was always in early with flowers in my hair, and I'm a nerd underneath it all.
Aren't we all? Okay, on that bombshell, I want to get to our final topic, and it's really important before we wrap up. What data insights and tools are there to make brand storytelling better? I mean, so much of what we're talking about, yes, people around the room having good ideas, very interesting idea from Anne, referencing Ed Catmull and what they were doing at Pixar, the Brains Trust, but so much is automated, creativity at scale. Help us out. What insights tools are available?
Yeah, I think, I mean, loads. I think we've got more data than we've ever had. So there is no shortage of information and data. I think what's really important then is, what data do we look at? How do we understand it? How do we test to help inform and shape our thinking? And everyone is looking at data, and everyone is trying to level up their work in everything that they do. So I think it's really important. But what's important is, I come back to that word curiosity that I mentioned earlier, and I think we talk about this a lot in our team, is, how do let's not just keep doing the same thing. We've got to keep testing and developing new thinking and trial new things to grab attention, because it is attention is really difficult. Every single campaign, we have to earn the trust, attention of every audience. And we have to do that by delivering messaging in a compelling, useful, impactful way. So I think that's super important. So we're looking at data. We're lucky because, not lucky, we've worked hard to do it, but we've got 9 platforms, 3 kind of broad audience groups, and we can really look at, different discrete audiences within those groups across all of our content to really understand what are the patterns. And everyone's different because people work in different industries, like every company's different. But I think that allows you to understand some of the broad themes that then we can apply when we're designing content and shaping content. But it's still great to test it as well. So we can test different treatments, and all of that gives us a really unique position on our audiences. So we want to always position ourselves, and it's important. If we don't understand our own audiences from an editorial point of view, then that's going to be really difficult for us as a business. So that's the heartblood of our business. But if we can then from a media perspective, if we're able to share that intelligence with our clients to help them create content that really stands out, that is useful, that drives impact, that's what we want to do. So, we have a huge amount of tools and data and experts within our building that can be really, really useful to help companies really hone in on the most kind of effective angle to tell their story.
Yeah, and that's I guess one of the big things in this industry nowadays, isn't it? Where media owners are, and agencies as well, we'll get into that, where you're actually competing almost on the basis of how good your tools are, as much as your audience is. And that can be a challenge, I guess, for marketers as well, where let's bring it to agencies where you're not in the days of where, we just bought telly ads and it was all about your best relationships and ability to get discounts from the TV sales houses. You're actually, you're winning pitches, aren't you, on the basis of how good your proprietary tools are and how smart you seem, how capable you seem. So if I'm a marketer, I'm not asking you to plug any particular WPP or Group M product, but if you're a marketer, how would you evaluate that in order to be able to decide, yes, these are the best insights, the best tools available to me?
I think it does boil down to the people using the tools, because I don't know why I'm going to talk about golf, because doesn't appeal to me at all. But a pro golfer with a really basic club will hit much better than somebody who's not a specialist, doesn't understand the whole picture, using a most expensive club in the world. And that's, so from what I've seen, it's very easy to get sucked into, oh gosh, this is a fab new tool and does this and that, but it doesn't connect together with anything else. So you don't have a true connected view. And secondly, you get kind of lost in this, oh gosh, it does all these fabulous things. And then you forget that it's got nothing to do with the thing you're trying to do. So I think I'd almost go back to, you need specialists who are able to, who have an overview of the whole picture, which we have, and also people who can guide clients to spend as much time on what is the thing we're looking to prove, or what is the thing we're looking to find, or what is the question. You need to spend as much time on the question as you do on trying to work together on proving the answer. You know, those are equally weighted, because you can spend all the time looking for fabulous tools, give you loads and loads of answers, but you know, what was the question? Well, it's kind of, that was a very muddled response. Hopefully it makes some kind of sense.
Which betrays the complexity of the answer.
I think that's the challenge now with data, though, isn't it? There's so much data, but that actually then, like, it puts us in a position we need to prove, like, and we should be able to prove in most cases, certainly when brands are talking about their overall objective, we should be able to prove the impact of our work in some way. And that, like, again, it's a competition. Like, we're working harder and harder all the time to really ask the tough questions of agencies and clients, actually, to get to that point of like, well, what does success look like and how are we going to prove it? Because it's like, is it just an amazing creative campaign that everyone feels really great about? But if we can't prove it, like, at some point, questions then are asked, and rightly so. So how do we make sure we're all really clear on, okay, if we get to this point, that's going to be successful. Yeah. And we want to feel good about the creativity and the emotional impact that our work does as well, but we've got to prove it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, media is in the business, everything we do has to be proved, and that's the power of, if we come back full circle, that's the power of having the media custodians and the kind of the budget holders together with the brand custodians, bring them into the room together, so that, you can bring the two things together, because sometimes a big idea, you can't prove it ahead of time. You can give a sense, and from how you're going to deliver it from a media perspective, you could say, we know this is going to work in X ways, but by definition, a new kind of an idea, an innovation, has not been seen before quite in that same combination. So if you could prove it, then it wouldn't really be new, would it? So it's a balance, I think, and that's why I take my hat off to marketeers, because they do have to have courage as well as huge breadth of expertise and ability to be an amazing conductor, as in orchestra versus a copper wire, because they're balancing those two things, I think.
Be brave, a good call to action to wrap up episode 3. And that's all the time we have for this third episode in our series, and only one episode to go. We've gone through this series quickly. Join us in episode 4, where we'll be joined by Duncan again to wrap up this series with a deep dive on video, all important. But until then, thank you so much, listener or viewer, indeed if you're watching this on our YouTube, for tuning into this special podcast in association with our friends at Bloomberg Media about the future of marketing. You can catch all our episodes on our normal podcast feed, as well as our YouTube channel if you're watching this. We're cranking out the videos, lighting up media and advertising, lots of debates, and tune into our LinkedIn as well, where you just need to read the comments for what I'm posting, what the Media Leader account is posting. The debates are strong. Thanks to our brilliant production partners at Trisonic, who not only work with us on this series, but our normal episodes on the Media Leader podcast. Catch them at trisonic.co.uk. And I hope you can join us, not just for episode 4 of this series, but just generally, if you like the Media Leader podcast, please do subscribe. Thank you very much.